Eagle Expressway getting up here. It's like bumper to bumper. There was no traffic. Where is everybody? Home with the flu?
All the important people figured out.
Well, there you go. There you go. So my name is Kathy Lazarus, and I represent the League of Women Voters for the Community Coalition. And let's just do a quick round of introductions, so John knows who's here. Shally, we'll start with you.
Shally Cirque, Los Altos Mountain View PTA Council President.
Go ahead.
Gloria Geller, volunteer, copy editor, always looking for nonprofits to serve.
Ed Sorensen. Go that way.
Bart Nelson.
Vicki Reader with AAW with Los Altos Women's Parks and Los Altos Stage Company.
Wow. 3 business cards. Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary Anderson. I'm a retired citizen, work at home, looking around 5 places where I can make a little bit of a difference.
Howard Schroeder, retired resident.
Roy Lave, I represent my wife.
That's a tough job, Roy.
Kim Cranston with Los Altos Forward, Los Altos Property Owners Downtown, and on the Coalition Steering Committee.
Jerry Sorensen.
David Rock, Los Altos Hills Little League, and co-chair of LACC.
Joe.
Joe Iger, Los Altos Community Foundation.
Ann Stedler, I'm a visitor with you.
Thank you.
Chris Jordan, City Manager.
Barbara Loeffner.
Vladimir Lavish, Los Altos School District.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming this morning, and thank you, John, for coming on really short notice.
As I told you before, I'm a politician, so you
We appreciate that. You want me to do a formal introduction?
No.
No? I've got a little list of all of your life accomplishments. Kim is saying yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So our Mayor Mordo has a degree in engineering and a master's in business from Stanford. Spent many years in the private sector working as a CFO for a number of companies, corporations, all over, frankly.
Yep.
Which one did you like the best? Otis Elevator or Pratt & Whitney?
Otis Elevator.
Otis Elevator, okay. We know that. John was on the council in Los Altos Hills for 8 years. And then he and his wife downsized and moved to Los Altos, and now we have him on our council. In addition to his professional and government work, he's also been very active in a number of civic organizations. I think you were a CSA hometown hero 1 year.
Yeah, Barbara and I.
Yeah, both of you.
I was riding her coattails too.
Were you? Okay. And you've been an active Rotarian for quite a number of years in Los Altos. So we appreciate you being here this morning, and I will cede the floor to you.
All right.
So go for it.
Okay, I'm very honored to be invited here, but you guys are all very sophisticated, and you know that as mayor, I have absolutely no power, just the gavel. So what I'm going to tell you is purely the perspective of one council member on the council. My opinion don't have any more validity or strength or power to be realized than anybody else. So, but fortunately, it looks like the council is coming a little bit more together in terms of the priorities. And tomorrow we have an offsite. Offsite, no, in fact, it's going to be in the council chambers, but a retreat where we are going to zero in on defining better our priorities for next year. So hopefully that's going to confirm what I just said. I mean, you may be wondering how come it was a 3-2 vote on the community center. The truth is it was a 4-1 vote. Jeannie essentially wanted more analysis, etc., which is not atypical for her, but essentially she supports it, and so I think we're getting more together. So let me tell you what, from my point of view, the key priorities are. There are about 4 key priorities right now. Number 1, and frankly the most important for the long term, is the visioning of downtown. and not stopping at the visioning. We need to wrap up all the studies, charrettes, and input and all that, and zero in on what we, the consultants, with all the input they got, what they understand is the consensus of most people as to what we want to do, the level of vibrancy, etc., the level of development. So I think we're pretty close to doing that, and I think I talked with Chris yesterday, and I think we're going to wrap up this thing as soon as we can. So the next phase comes, and which is critical, which is if we define better what we want, how do we make it happen? Okay? And there are several tools to make it happen. And some of the most important one, well, there are some very easy low-hanging fruit, and one of them is being more liberal in the uses of the ground floor in the CRS district in particular. As you all know, there's retail is changing. All those little brown boxes that show up on your doorsteps are replacing a lot of the retail sales in the store. So our ordinance requires that, unless you're grandfathered, any retail store has to be replaced by a retail store. And unfortunately, there's not enough retail, by retail meaning literally selling stuff, selling merchandise. So we need to be more liberal, and that's something that we can do very easily. Okay, we have to do it carefully, but it doesn't cost anything essentially. Number two, we have this parking studies which have been parked for 2 years, which is again something relatively cheap that. And the main conclusion, you probably read it, most of you are well informed, it is to reduce the parking ratios to something more more adequate to the current situation, which is essentially we have excess parking ratios which require more parking and make it impossible to build anything downtown, even within the existing setbacks, so in the existing limitations. So, for example, in the CRS district, you can go to 30 feet, 2 stories, but most of the lots are 25 foot wide, and therefore you can, if you had a second story, you can't park it. So, because there's no place to build parking on site. So that's something that the parking recommendation, which are now with the Planning Commission and then will come to us soon to council, can address reducing the parking ratio, instituting an in-lieu parking, where if you build and you don't have a place to put the parking, you pay, and the city builds parking. So those are the things that, and then there was some other minor recommendation, but really, again, low-hanging fruit is to redo the striping on our plazas and fit in a lot more parking spaces for little cost. So that's another thing that we can do. Another thing that I'm very keen on is, I think, in reaction, as you remember, the last council, about around 2010, raised the height limit on the CD and CDR3 district, which is everything except the core of downtown. And as a result, there has been a spurt of development, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, the standards we have resulted in some buildings that people hate. And this canyon effect on First Street. And I think it was done because I think, frankly, we had the wrong approach to controlling density. We essentially said, as long as you fit within setbacks, you can build your whatever you want. So as a result, you end up with boxes, First and Main, okay, 400 Main, Safeway are much too high because there are no setback, they're just boxes. Interestingly enough, 100 Main, the post office condos, as we call them, are the highest building on the street, on that section of the street, by far. They're 45 feet high. However, everybody likes them because they're set back. So the solution to this is very simple, is to be more liberal on the height, go back to 45 feet, for example, but then limit the density by using FAR. Say you can build only 2.5 FAR, which is 2.5 times the number of square feet of the lot. So that means on average you're going to have 2.5 floors. But then you have much more flexibility architecturally to set back and step back the upper floor, and just like 100 First Street, and it's a great way to, and again, just like the parking in lieu and all of that, it's nothing new. I mean, all the other cities are doing that. We are the only ones, for some reason, who are not doing that. So, I'm very keen on studying this approach and then changing back unfortunately, in December before last, we lowered the height on the CDR3 district because it was a knee-jerk reaction to the canyon effect. We said, okay, the solution is too high, let's lower it. And that was the wrong answer in my view. So I would like to revisit all this and then redo the whole zoning of the downtown, and to take into account what we want to achieve now, which is a little bit more vibrancy, but still limiting the height and not limiting the masses and limiting the density, but doing it in a more intelligent way. So that's the number one priority. Number two priority, obviously, is to finish the community center, okay? We finally got the vote for three of us, but in fact, as I said before, I think at least everybody's in favor of it. It's just a matter of some of us wanted to be a little more cautious, but that would have been 6 more months or another year where everything going up in price. And so I'm glad we got that done. So that is very important. We need to do all the detail work, the layout, etc., of the rooms, the programs. But essentially, this is on track, and it's a key priority. We're hoping to break ground in December. I think, given the amount of construction going on with all the disasters and the economy doing very well, we may have to wait until spring or early summer next year before we actually break ground. The third priority that we, I think, all agree on, which is difficult to do, but we have to do it, is housing. We are not, as a city, we are not meeting our obligation, our regional obligation to provide housing in general. Not enough housing is built here, and not enough affordable housing is built in Los Altos. So we have to look at ways to do it. We had a study session last Tuesday to look at questions of density and how to change our approach given the new housing laws that were enacted by the California legislature this year. So we are looking at changing. There are things we can do short term, and there are things we can do longer term that will require to get approved by the California Housing Department. But among the things we can do relatively quickly is institute a housing impact fee. So we already studied it, we have a draft ordinance which we sent back for adjustment, but, and I expressed this to Chris yesterday, and everybody is frustrated with how long it takes to get things done, and we're gonna crank it up a little bit, but essentially we're almost done with this ordinance. It has to come back and we have to adjust a few things, but essentially it consists in saying for anything that's built, commercial or big residential, and I would like to extend it to all residential, including single-family homes, there is a fee to be paid, and that fee goes towards providing housing, affordable housing. This is something that we've done, the study has been done already, in other words, the economic study that supports that, so we can safely, legally do it. So that would generate some money. We want to, perhaps a little bit, we want to also encourage affordable housing for rent as opposed to for sale. Housing, BMRs for sales, below market unit for sales are not a good idea because people's circumstances change, and it's a kind of a lottery system. You know, you build 5 affordable units, 20 people apply, 5 lucky winners get it, and then 5 years later, some of those lucky winners their financial circumstances have changed, but they still have it for the next 30 years. So, whereas rental is much better because, first of all, you reach more people, you benefit more people, and second, when their circumstances change, they cannot renew their lease if they don't show that they qualify. So, so we want to encourage that by providing in lieu. So when you build a BMR, and build a condo building, we will encourage you not to build them and to give us the money. And with the money, we will subsidize housing. Now, in terms of the other thing we can do on the housing area is ADU. You've heard about accessory dwelling units, they're called, is granny units. So we have an ordinance that came to us, and the idea is to liberalize the rules so more people can build secondary units, and we can reduce the size, the minimum size of your lot. We can reduce the parking requirement, etc. So to incentivize secondary units. So this is, again, it's in the works, and it's one of those things we want to crank it up and bring it back as soon as possible, because there is consensus on the council that there's at least 4, probably 5 votes to do that. What else? On the affordable housing, one of the ideas we have, which have 2 advantages. One is contribute to the vibrancy of downtown and contribute to housing, is to take one of the plazas and develop it as a workforce housing project. And since if we essentially, and they're nonprofit construction companies who specialize in doing affordable housing, and we provide the land, and they do the building and then replace the parking, etc. So this is something that we would like to address. Then, okay, the last priority is, and the fourth one is we need to support the library. As you know, we started a task force to look at either expanding significantly by about 30% the square footage of this library, or tear it down and build a new library in the same site, about 40,000 square feet. And if we were to do that, you're going to tell me where's the money coming from. it would be, it's not the city really, it's the citizens. There is an entity called NCLA, North County Library Authority, which has the authority to raise taxes with approval of the residents of Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. So there was a district formed, and right now you are all paying $76 per year for each parcel to support the running of the library. Now the idea is if there is a project to remodel the library and to rebuild it, we would put it in front of the voters and say, do you want to pay another $50 a year to remodel the library, or do you want to pay another $250 a year to build a new library? Okay. And given the support historically for the library in Los Altos, where 76% of the people voted for the 76, or 74% voted for the $76, it has a good chance of passing. Again, it's nothing guaranteed, but this, so the city is kind of auxiliary to that. We obviously it's a city building, so but it's a separate effort that we have to do. My last point, number 5, really is for all the remaining building and the remaining infrastructure at Los Altos. Since we decided to put $35 million into the community center, it doesn't mean we're out of money, but it means that, you know, for the rest, we have to be a little more careful and find creative way to do the rest. We need to put together, we need to close the year. I'd love to close this year with a specific plan for when we're going to fix the other building and where the money's coming from, etc. So essentially that's it. That's my kind of comment, and now I'm open to any question you have. And again, what I'd like to say, it's my opinion, it's not the council opinion. Okay?
Two things. I wondered if you've been involved, or you've thought about, just as one of the councilmen, and possibly talking to one of the others, or two of them, you can only talk to one of the others, about the idea of a master developer, any sort of public-private partnership coming in to assist and basically getting the word out to educating the public that that is a positive thing. It's not a greedy developer. It's been done very successful in Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and I could name a litany of other cities where you have an experienced professional teaming up with. And so that was one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention to everyone, the reality is the 400 Main Street building is only 30 feet tall, and it is so massively ugly because they are allowed to build out to between 2 and 5 foot setbacks that it appears to be taller than that. So the irony of the DB3's debacle of promoting lowering the heights is they lowered the height. They did it based on a building that was only 30 feet tall, and that which just shows that it's form and not height that we should be attacking. The city should be following its principles on.
Okay, first on this one, because in addition to, I mean, you're just reinforcing what I said before, but in addition, you did make the point that this building is 38 feet, because we have a stupid code that says 30, limitation to 30 is the ceiling. So, and you've allowed 8 more feet of parapet, which is stupid because essentially you get the effect of 38 feet, but the benefit of 30 feet. And it's absurd.
It's a very good point.
So
we're the only city that
fix that. Now back to the other issue. I think one of the troubling things about Bill Lee's analysis, and he's the economic consultant that's helping with the visioning, is his analysis says essentially all of the amenities that we want, the plazas, the roundabout, the cross, the bridge over San Antonio, et cetera, they'd like to have. Well, the economic development, even in the more aggressive scenarios, do not provide the money for doing it. Now, I know La Pod has a plan which says, well, we have an idea because our plan makes economic sense. We actually can do some things which will produce the money. And among the things they're proposing is building on San Antonio, essentially on city land, an office building or, or condos, whatever, then the benefit, have the benefit of providing feet on the street, across the street without, essentially have too much height over there. So now one sub-idea of that is to say, with us having to put 35 million in the community center, we don't have tons of money to reduce City Hall. Now, Chris has an idea, or something, a good idea or maybe it's Sharif's idea, is they need space in City Hall. And what they wanted to do is expand the offices into the council chambers and change the entrance completely on the current entrance of the council chamber would be the entrance to the thing, and redo a lot of things in there. The downside of this idea is it requires to create council chamber somewhere else, and his idea is to put them in Lacey, which means if we do this plan, we have to do both buildings. And with the money being not as much available, how do we do that? That's a problem. So one idea is, why don't we build lease a piece of the 18 acres of the civic center land, maybe where there are now apricot trees, or maybe where Lacey is, or between Lacey and then put a new building there, 4 or 5 stories. Was it 55-year lease or whatever, long lease, and make it the first floor or floor and a half or whatever we need as City Hall, and the rest of it commercial. So the developer would recoup its cost with leasing all the rest of the thing, and then we tear down City Hall and we put the apricot trees, if people want them still, in front. So the advantage is on the same number, on the same footprint, and without money from the city, we can do what we wanted to do. So that's
an underground parking garage now?
with underground parking garage, yeah. So anyway, this is just an idea. Somebody dropped it in my ear, and it's kind of taking a little bit of the La Pod idea, and maybe something that would be acceptable to people, because number one, in terms of footprint, it's the same as the current city hall, and we preserve the open space, and it would be recessed from San Antonio, so 4 or even 5-story would be no problem. It would be in the middle. So anyway, this is an idea. Again, it's purely somebody else's idea, which I think is interesting to look at. I have no idea if my colleagues are going to puke all over it.
John, on your 5 points, one was the different activity levels that the committee is interested in. Can you give us a concept about what your and the council's perception of the consultants' different activity levels, of where the community is asking you to land?
Well, the consultants survey, which is not as scientific as Godby, say the majority of the people want more or much more violence. The Godby study is a little bit less, but still, everybody wants more, I mean, the vast majority want more, but, so we have to look at this and be discussed tomorrow. But my guess is for me, people want like 30, 40% more vibrancy. They don't want 80%, they don't want Castro Street, they don't want University Avenue, they don't want Santana Road, God forbid. But they want dial it up. And I think Godby probably gives you the right number, and at least it's a number that's more scientific, Yes.
A lot of the conversation in Los Altos is focused on the downtown, particularly in terms of workforce, affordable housing, those kinds of things. My question is, are there other areas in the community where there are underutilized sites that potentially could be developed for slightly higher density workforce, affordable housing?
No, absolutely.
And how do you get community acceptance?
I didn't mention when I talked about one of the priority being housing is as part of the longer term things we're doing is we're going to do a specific plan for, hopefully, I'm in favor of doing a specific plan for El Camino corridor, the CT zoning, and see what we can do in terms of maybe going all the way to this precise plan to encourage housing, especially affordable housing on El Camino. The issue we have, you all know about, is the people who live behind, they're low-rise buildings. They're either condos, there's some rentals, and they are very much worried about building high on El Camino. So we're limited, but we can play with the setback. So like the building, for example, that was at 4880 El Camino, the one that was approved last year, Jeff Taylor. We have so much setback on the ground floor and more setback on the upper floor, so that if you're behind it, it's more recessed. So anyway, but it's a consideration that we have to be careful what we're doing there. But definitely the El Camino corridor is where we have a lot more possibility to do it. To meet our numbers, to check the box that we've done our share, we can do it. A lot of it on El Camino, but in order to, the advantage of doing something here, it helps also with the vibrancy of downtown. If you have a bunch of people living here, it's better than having asphalt, and cars. There'll be place for the cars out of sight, and at least we can have people there. There would be more life at night. They go out and walk around, and so it wouldn't be dead by 6 o'clock. Los Altos is dead, essentially. So it'd be nice to have more people living there. Yes. Okay.
One of the things that, I've only been close to this effort for 10 years, and I was always probably going to have for 40, but his wife. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, taking polls is really, to me, not particularly helpful, because it's people who are very smart, but they haven't been given the alternatives. And when you sit down and actually talk with them, they want the alternative. They want to know, okay, what does this mean? You just have somebody 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories, whatever. They have an opinion, but it's not an educated opinion. And the way to get that educated opinion is to actually think through an entire program.
Yeah.
So when you're moving forward so rapidly on the new city civic center or whatever, without even a circulation plan, without an overall program of how you're going to pay for everything or site everything, it's very difficult, and you have no idea, when you go out to the public for a, $200 million bond issue or something, well, they're gonna say no, because they don't understand the trade-offs. But if you have a complete program, and you have one or two alternative programs, so that people, then they actually understand, and then they go, oh, well, gee, you mean if we have 4 stores, we can do this for free? Or if we, these are things that will alter people's minds significantly, because everybody has an opinion with the knowledge that they have, and the increased knowledge.
I totally agree with you. I mean, we were discussing with Gary earlier, if you ask people, do you want more vibrancy? Say yes. Do you want more parking? Say yes. Do you want more trees? Yes. Do you want, so they want everything. But they don't, if you ask the question, individually, there's no way to do the trade-off. So you need to show the whole scenario. So I agree with you. It'd be nice to have a broad scenario, and a more moderate scenario, not, and then see what
And attach dollars to it. And attach dollars.
I agree.
John, one concern that I have is, as we look at workforce housing, as you pointed out, 25 items, the location of that will impact the downtown. For example, if we put workforce housing on a plaza, the benefits that first come to mind is that the people that are living there will come home at night and engage in the community at nighttime. However, during the day, what we find, and in my properties, the noontime, daytime activity on the street is as important as nighttime activity. So with that in mind, to increase the vibrancy, I'm concerned that putting workforce housing on a plaza would not be as beneficial to the community as putting office on the plaza. So the office concept...
But we have 10 plazas.
So
absolutely. Doing one-on-one doesn't mean we can't do another one. Like the opportunity study that was done in 2009 or whatever.
Yep.
I think it's great. So we should, now that we're not in a recession anymore, we should pull that out and hurry up and look at it while we're still not in a recession. Otherwise, by the time we decide to do something, we have to wait.
One of the very successful, and I compliment the city on moving forward, was the terraces on Pine Lane and how that was developed. I have a hard time recognizing that it's 3 stories, and it was done extremely well. And the parking underground is done in such a manner that you really don't get the feel that there are cars underneath. So compliments to the city on how well they did that project. And the learning there might be that we could apply it somewhere on city land.
Yeah. Yep.
You might want to ask the residents around there what they think about the parking. But on that note, for a long time, the city has focused on traffic, be it speeding or whatever, typically speeding, although speeding on Freeman has come to a grinding, congested halt. But I would hope that through all of this, the council doesn't forget the traffic impact on the residents. It sort of feels like it's always just this little side thing when a resident brings it up and complains. And that shouldn't be the case. I think, and I'm not accusing, I just think that the city should really make traffic a focus, parking, traffic, congestion, everything, safety. I think a lot of times coming out of underground parking lots, if it's very short, it's very dangerous. I've worked in places like that. I just take my life in my hands, trying to get on the street. So I think that should always be a priority, kind of an unspoken but spoken, maybe unwritten but always spoken priority.
Well, it's a very good point, and if you notice, I was very much in favor, I pushed very hard, and we did it, to transfer the whole issue of traffic to the BPAC and rename it Complete Streets Commission, because in traffic and car circulation was the purview of the Planning Commission, and it was called the PTC, and they never talked about the T except in connection with specific application for a specific project. So I think now that is part of the Complete Streets Commission, what we need to do is populate that commission with a few people who are more interested in cars than just bicycles. Okay, essentially, historically, because it was the BPAC, it was mostly people who were interested in walking and biking. We need to have some people there, and then we have a place to address the issues.
Well, the planning commission should make it an important part of their analysis every time.
No, they look at it only with respect to a specific project, but the more systemic issues of traffic, what do we do about traffic is now the Complete Street.
And the other just corollary idea is sort of maybe a not written goal, annual goal, but an overall goal that was written previously is transparency. And I think a lot of transparency has to do with education. So just like the way you're going to do a survey if you're doing a project, and I worked on the Hillview Task Force, but I still felt like every time I brought it up to random people that I know, they had no clue what was going on. They had to do something very proactive to find out about it. And I'm not really sure the real answer. Our own Los Altos free newspaper, I don't know what. But everyone's saying, oh, they can log on to the computer. They don't do that. Somehow, what important things that are going on in the city are only getting feedback from very small groups. And I don't know how to fix that, but I think something.
When we did, I had a weekly meeting with Chris on Thursday morning, and we discussed a little bit the objectives. And he agreed with me that objectives such as transparency and outreach and all that are not specifically objective. They're just a way, a principle, the way we operate, And we've done a lot, but you're right, we can always do more, and we should do more. The problem is, most of the people who live, especially the young families, are too busy, and they don't pay attention until there's a specific issue related to route to school, for example, or traffic issue, whatever, a specific issue that affects them, then they pay attention. Otherwise, they don't have a clue even that we have a city council, how many people are on the council, who is on the, they have no clue whatsoever. But we have to essentially push out the information more to try to get the people more involved. But there's only a limit, you can bring the horse to water, but, can make him drink.
I guess Chris isn't here, but I think the city's come a long way with the city manager updates. They do the little updates after the council meeting. So there's been a lot, and Erica's doing a lot, on next door and things. So there's a lot of progress over the last couple, 3 years.
You mentioned that last week there was an email from somebody to council saying, how come, here's what Palo Alto is doing, I think it was Palo Alto, or no, Redwood City, forwarded and say, I don't know why I got this because I live in Los Altos, but I got this wonderful email from Redwood City about what they're doing. And Chris responded very politely, hey lady, we're doing the same. You just have to subscribe.
There's been progress, a lot of progress.
Anything else? Okay. Yeah.
Well, just a couple details on the Civic Center. Have you ever thought of moving the police station down to the mid-center maintenance yard? Free up that space, put the orchard back there, and then...
I think we should free up that space. The police shouldn't be downtown. They should be closer to South Los Altos in a more central way. So right now...
And also, to me, a Civic Center should be accessible to the public, and that's kind of a fenced off...
They block a whole area behind fence and all that.
Yeah.
And and also, I think when we look at that issue, in my view, we should look at cooperating more with the county by using their services and their facility, not, I mean, keeping our police force, because people are very attached to my policeman, I know him, that's fine, but we don't need to have holding cells and armory and all that. We can rely on the county on that and rebuild something which will be much smaller and much cheaper in the corporate yard on of Fremont there, and free up that space for future expansion of the community center.
Quick, just to follow up on that, and what Ted said earlier too, is it too late to put on our priorities for next year? I mean, some kind of a master plan again for Hillview, because I know it's been attempted, it's just like, we just need to start taking some steps forward on a master plan for what to do with the entire 18.8 acres and have some phases, whether it's...
Yeah, well, that's a little bit touches on my thing that we need a plan for the next 10-year plan for all the buildings and all the facilities. And also it touches with what David said about having a master developer, because we're doing right now the community center. We are working on the library, and maybe we will start at about the same time to do the library. And then we want to do something with the community, with a city hall. So before we go too far in the detail of those things, we need to figure out the whole thing, how it's going to work out. So that's why I think I'm very supportive of this idea. Unfortunately, Chris had to go to a meeting just when we started talking about the subject, and he's the one who should be hearing this. But we need to bring it back up when we have lunch with, well, not lunch, but meeting on Tuesday, and bring that up again.
Just wanted to tie into what Nancy just said. That is why we're sitting in this room. I mean, the purpose of the mission in the original 20 to 25 organizations that joined the Los Altos Community Coalition was to have a specific plan for downtown. So it's for downtown and the community center. And if we, as a group, I mean, we have been very careful to not try to be a shadow city council, to not, this isn't a political, that's literally why the group was formed. And so now that we see the light at the end of the tunnel with the downtown visioning, we feel that it's the time, you know, the timing is right for the city council to start realizing that this can't be done in piecemeal, that the next council and 4 years later can completely reverse. We're the only city, literally, from Gilroy to Burlingame, that doesn't have a specific plan for its downtown. And it's archaic and it's ruinous to the health of the city. It just doesn't make sense. So the other thing I was just going to add about the traffic, if the parking is changed to add restriping, that has an immediate, I think that a lot of times when it's presented, people only present the parking issue, not the traffic. A lot of the people that are causing the current traffic downtown and the near accidents at 2nd and Main, for instance, are because people are circling parking lots. Literally, we can get 25 to 31 parking spaces if we just restripe to 8.5 feet, which is the current standard throughout the peninsula and the South Bay. So that's like such low-hanging fruit that...
So what you're asking for, what everybody seems to be asking for, is exactly what I sympathize with Jeannie. She erupted at the council last time because she said, I don't want to approve just this thing. I want to, and yet ideally we should approve everything at the same time, but it's so difficult. It's very, very difficult. So so we have to sub-optimize. But I think we can still do quite a bit to try, since we have like 3 projects at the same time on the same thing, and longer term figuring out the police. I think it would be a good time. You know, again, it's my number 5 objective is to finish the year with a plan with everything. So we do it in parallel. So when we finalize the layout of the entrance, et cetera, we know where community center is going to be, but exactly how it connects and all that is still a little flexible. Then we figure out the library, we figure out the the city hall, and we have a plan for the 18 acres. That would be absolutely required.
Pardon my ignorance about city council retreats, but I'm wondering what you hope the city council will accomplish at the retreat tomorrow.
Well, there is an agenda, it's online.
I know,
But essentially, the number one objective is to agree on the goals. There is some input on the survey, the Godby survey, and Godby is going to make a presentation to what conclusion he would draw from that, and that should in fact inform our discussion on the objective, because our goals are essentially to give the people what they want. So the survey is very important, but the major goals we know, and then to gel those goals, to get agreement that yes, this is it, and specifically the sub-project. In other words, we want to have an ADU ordinance by February 15th. We want to have a, et cetera. So, kind of push a little bit. The staff has so many things, so unless you say, we want this one right away, we want this one in 2 months, etc., then they can order the thing. Also, they can, they can hire in additional help or consultants, to respond to that, to what we want.
And just an additional, so in favor of looking towards transparency, what happens at the retreat, is that then communicated to the community, or?
It's public.
Okay.
It's public. It's going to be videotaped because it's right on at City Hall. Okay. 9 o'clock City Hall. Everybody's invited.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
One building you haven't mentioned that's on the community center property is the theater.
Yeah.
It's in, it's a building that I think was built by the school district back in the 40s. It hasn't been in bad repair for a long time. In part of the vision for downtown is that has been brought up by the consultants of the theater in downtown.
Yeah.
Do you think that has any reality?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think for me it would be one of the other plazas. Have a public-private partnership with, maybe offices on one half and theater at the end or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. I think. I would like to see most of those plazas, most of the asphalt covered by attractive building and thriving businesses and offices, as opposed to just asphalt.
I think time for one more.
Last one.
So one of the things that you point out how difficult it is to pull all these things together, but for people who actually do this for a living, it's not as hard as you think. And several years ago now, I think maybe before this group was formed, this fellow you're talking to, I think on Tuesday, Robert Klein, he gave a talk, and he outlined how you bring the community together. And what you do is, and what his point was, you build constituencies. So, for instance, the theater has a constituency in town. It may be, I don't know how big it is, it may be 500, it may be 5,000, I don't know. But the point is, it's just one constituency. There's a constituency for the pool. I don't know how big that is. And you
not big enough.
I actually think it is big enough, because what a master developer does is he figures out what these constituencies are, and he builds that into a core that is necessary to get everybody on board. And when you do it piecemeal like that, you only get the theater constituency. You want a theater over there? Oh, I don't know. Yeah. But if you get the pool people saying, oh, I get a pool, you get the theater people saying, oh, I get a theater, Now you have everybody voting, they don't care about it. The citizens don't care about what they do. So the point is you build these constituencies, and then that's how you create an overall program. And if you don't do that, then you get sharpshooters all over, knocking everything down.
But this is Los Altos, we always get sharpshooters anyway.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.